This is our session on LEED for existing buildings, although it's much more exciting than just a simple title. We have an exciting panel of presenters, some folks with some great experience to share with you. And we'll be specifically looking at LEED Operations and Maintenance version 4.1 using the performance score. My name is Kat Wagenschutz. I'm a director at the U.S. Green Building Council, and I sit on our technical solutions team. I have been privileged to focus the majority of my career on LEED for existing buildings and over the past year to help teams that have pursued our version 4.1 O&M beta. But before we dive into the presentation, I would like to briefly introduce our panel in order of appearance. We have Danielle Horton. She is the founder and principal of Verdani Partners, a full-service sustainability consulting firm. She brings over 17 years of experience in sustainable real estate and sits on the USGBC LEED Advisory Committee. Chris Schaffner is the founder and president of The Green Engineer, a sustainable design consulting firm located in Concord, Massachusetts. He is also a member of the USGBC Advisory Committee and an incoming chair on the LEED Steering Committee. Gary Thomas is here from CBRE. He is responsible for the leadership of sustainability services at CBRE, asset services, and global corporate services portfolios, as well as non-CBRE managed portfolios. Since starting his team in 2007, Gary's team has completed LEED certifications on over 900 buildings worldwide, encompassing 200 million square feet. And Amanda Timmons is the founder and president of Ampigen Solutions, with a focus on full-service LEED consulting for existing occupied buildings. She has been one of the early adopters of using performance scoring in ARC, as has some great hands-on experience to share with all of you today. So that was the slide that I meant to show while I was doing the introductions. Now that that's out of the way, we also have an overview of our learning objectives, which I'm not going to read through. And so for the next hour, I invite you to come on a journey with us. I am a mother of 2 kids, and in my home we spend many hours reading stories of all kinds, specifically adventure tales. So the 5 of us would like to weave an adventure story for you. And now that you are here, grab a seat, most of you already have, sit down, and we will begin. Not unlike stories of quests, our story includes horrors to rival the ages, a group of people committed to a better future, a treasure map, challenges, fortitude, and a bit of gold at the end of the rainbow. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me invite Danielle to start the story and set the stage for us with bum, 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 impending doom.
Thank you. So I'm going to try to make the connection between kind of our big, aggressive climate reduction targets and the roles of certification. Let me get this. I think we all know everything that's happening, and we need a lot of change very quickly. And existing buildings play a really big role of that. I think for those of you that know me, I've dedicated most of my career to greening existing buildings. Most of our building stock is made out of structures that are already here, and I think we can make such a big impact. So I'm very passionate about that. As Kat said, I'm the founder and president of Verdani Partners, and we manage about 3,000 properties, focusing on existing building operations. And I've been working I founded the first existing buildings committee in the country back in 2008, and I've been very involved through the existing buildings committees of USGBC National and the Advisory Council. I'm on I represent facility management and operations, but that has been kind of most of my focus. So to make the connection between kind of climate change, just want to start with like the really big picture, high level. I think a lot of us know this. We're all like, I'll be preaching to the choir here, but we do need to keep our carbon emissions parts per million to 350. And right now, we have exceeded 411 parts per million. The Paris Agreement focuses on keeping our temperature rise to 2 degrees, but scientists recommend that we limit that temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. And the U.S. plays a really important role on that, and it's unfortunate what's happening right now. But we are one of the top 10 carbon emitters. We were the number 2. And I think a big part of why China is number 1 is because they're the manufacturer of the world. But on a per capita basis, U.S. is the highest energy user. And our buildings use more energy than all other countries except the United States and China. So our buildings are very inefficient for the most part, and there's a lot of work that we need to do. The other thing is the Paris Agreement that's trying to limit carbon emissions to stay within 2 degrees. If all countries work together, including the U.S., the goal is to stay with 1.9 degrees. But if the U.S. continues with business as usual and does not participate, we're not going to reach that target, and we're going to stay at 2.3 degrees. The UN and a lot of other organizations obviously have been warning us that any increases above 2 degrees, we cannot blow our carbon budget. That would have catastrophic consequences. And we're already seeing a lot of those consequences happening. On the good side, even though we're the only country right now in the world that's trying to get out of the Paris Agreement, we cannot exit until November 4th, 2020, which is the day before the next presidential election, which is going to make climate change make the next election a big referendum on climate change, and hopefully we'll make the right decision. On the good side, even though on the federal level we're seeing more, our action is slowing down, on the local level, we have over 400 mayors and cities that are taking action, including California that's trying to go 100% renewable, and many other cities that are making targets to go 100% renewable. So I mentioned, existing buildings, 98 to 99% of our buildings, and represent 40% of our carbon emissions, a stat that all of us know. But 75% of those are ready for a retrofit, over 20 years old, and so there's a lot that we can do to make them more efficient. Since the 1980s, we've had more than 215 disasters at over $1 billion each, causing $1.2 trillion in damage. And 2017 tied with 2011 with the largest total number of events that caused over $306 billion in damages just alone in the U.S. Now, on the bright side, sorry, that's not very positive, but I think we all understand the sense of urgency. But the estimated cost of meeting our toughest 1.5 degrees climate targets about $0.5 trillion over the next 30 years, but it will save the world $30 trillion in damages. And California have America's biggest energy and carbon reduction goals and the fastest economic growth than the U.S. National average. So that's a proof that achieving those tough targets make economic sense. So it's not only good for the environment, but it makes good economic sense. And this is just to show, even though the U.S., I guess, seen as a bad guy, as like a top polluter, and you can see here the difference of how much more energy we use on a per capita basis compared to all other countries. But California is a proof that energy efficiency and all our codes and standards work, and they make a big impact. Just some of the benefits of California's investments in energy efficiency, and that all ties to certifications and what we're trying to accomplish. But since the 70s, when we started a lot of these programs, the per capita energy use in California stayed flat versus a 50% increase across the rest of the country. We also avoided 50 power plants. Our efficiency jobs grew by 15% versus 2% across the country. The efficiency program serving over 3 million households, and we slashed 30 million metric tons of pollution. And it's saving California a lot of money, $75 billion since the 70s. So it's it makes sense. Now, how we start connecting all of this with, certifications and LEED for existing buildings. One of the things is when there's a scoreboard, people rate differently. And I saw, this is from Boston Properties. But if you are just playing, if you're just playing and you're not tracking your score, you're not, you're going to play in a very different way. And it's the same way with buildings. You can have a sustainable building, but if you're not tracking your data, you're not reporting that information, you're not working with your tenants, you're probably not going to achieve the same level of performance as a building that's tracking that information. So certifications play a really important role in market transformation, and it's hard to read some of those, but there's a lot of new certifications popping up, and they play different roles, like GRESB and WELL and LEED. Right now, LEED, for example, is in 167 countries. We have 43,000 certified properties, 77 billion square feet certified. Over $29.7 billion contribution to U.S. GDP. And every 3 years, green buildings are expected to double. And India, Brazil will see up to 6-fold growth in certifications. In terms of the business case, I think we all know about the business case, that in terms of increases in rent, occupancy, operating expenses, building values, return on investment. That's why a lot of our clients are doing this, because it makes financial sense. But I think an important thing in terms of increasing asset value is that for every $10,000 that you invest in, you save through energy efficiency, asset value increases by $153,000, and that's assuming a 6.5 cap rate. But that's a really good way if you're trying to pitch something, you're selling to your CFO, to speak in their language and talk in those terms. LEED Bomb for operations, it's really evolving to a data-driven rating system that incorporates both strategies and performance, and we wanted to make it accessible to a more diverse building types to really be able to achieve market transformation beyond just Class A office buildings. But I do have 2 Class A office buildings that I want to mention here. One is the California Environmental Protection Agency. That was the first E-Bomb platinum-rated building in the world. It's Craig Shihai was the property manager for that. But that building, when we worked for Thomas Properties Group, but that building saves the tenant over $1.2 million in energy. It was less than a year payback. The Energy Star score is ranges between 99 and 100. So it's an incredible property. And we also have City National Plaza, which the energy consumption reduced by 40%. We say the savings in energy consumption annually is $4.3 million, and we added $66 million in asset value just by doing those efficiency improvements. So it really does make financial sense. In terms of where ARC and LEED is going and how it relates to especially for those that manage large real estate portfolios, is that we're moving to more data in the cloud, more data automation. We track utility data for all our portfolios, like energy, water, waste, carbon emissions on an annual basis. So we're tying this utility data automation with Energy Star Portfolio Manager and connecting that with certification. So we connect, we have an open API, so we're not, inputting data twice. And connect Energy Star Portfolio Manager to tools like ARC, which can also connect to reporting tools like GRESB. So it's really important that those systems are connected, they're talking to each other, and it's an ongoing flow of actual performance data. And the ARC platform too is a lot more streamlined. We have all of our certifications on the ARC platform, and we really like it. I think the property teams really like it as well. And the fact that it's connected, the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, we're focusing on the 5 key performance indicators that you're going to talk about in more detail. But we also can see in terms of a portfolio level tool, all the different buildings that we're managing. And I'd say a good thing about the carbon part of it is that we are tracking some of those energy, water, and waste. You can track all those things on Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And the carbon part, through ARC, you actually pull a report where you can show level 1 and 2 emissions, which ties to, like, a lot of us are setting science-based targets, so that also can help us, like, track and report that information. And, you know, between 2015, 2018, LEED certified buildings are estimated to have saved as much as $1.2 billion in energy savings, $1.49 million in water savings, $715 million in maintenance savings, and $54.2 million in waste savings. And we're very proud to, you know, be part of the solution, along many of you in the room that are also working toward, you know, getting more buildings certified. We've done over 200 certifications. We have about 42 properties in ARC, and our certification managers are in the room working hard to get, you know, track those buildings on an ongoing basis and report. So we're really excited to kind of leverage certifications to help, you know, make our buildings more efficient, reduce operating expenses, reduce carbon emissions, and help be a big, important part of the solution to fight climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle, for setting the stage and all the great work you do. Chris is going to talk to us about how we can all be in. So come one, come all.
Come one, come all. Thanks.
Yes.
So to reiterate, that's a tough word to say this time of the afternoon, what Danielle said, you know, existing buildings are really the solution to the problems that we face. Somebody said to me once that every carbon emission from last year was from an existing building. And so we need to fix that by fixing the existing buildings. Been involved in the city of Boston with their carbon-free Boston 2050 planning, and got a lot of experts in the room working on different solutions to reduce the carbon emissions. And one of the things they looked at was, let's make all the new buildings net zero by 2030. So if you make all the new buildings in Boston net zero by 2030, what do you think the emission reduction for the city of Boston is by 2050? Anybody want to throw out a number? 5%. Okay, who says higher than 5%? Basically lower than 5%? So the answer that the experts came up with was 1.5%. So we're not going to build our way out of these problems. We've got to do something with the existing buildings. And as a volunteer with the USGBC, I've been involved with helping to develop the LEED rating systems for a long time. And the realization that we've come to is that we have this goal of green buildings for everyone within this generation, but especially on the side of existing buildings, we really haven't done a great job of getting to everybody. We've done a good job of market penetration in big cities in North America for the Class A properties, but not everybody. And so how do we change the rating system to make it easier for people to use, more effective, and to close this gap between the new construction and the existing buildings we're worried about? And so that's where LEED version 4.1 has come in, and we've been working on 4.1 for a couple of years now. It's had a very aggressive time frame, thanks to the leadership of the USGBC, who's pushed us to do that. But it's important to note that LEED is a consensus document that is developed by all of us as members of the USGBC. So it is going through a process. We're listening. Everybody in this room contributes to the development of that. We've set some basic goals that we've tried to achieve with LEED version 4.1. The market barriers and lessons learned is one key part. We want to try to reduce the reasons why people say, I just can't do LEED. Another thing is that we do also want to be a global leadership standard. So at the same time as LEED is too high a bar for some, it is too low a bar for others. And so that's a careful balancing act that we're trying to walk that tightrope to make sure that it's relevant wherever you are in your journey towards sustainability. And also really looking at performance of buildings, not just predictions and nice thoughts, but how do buildings actually perform. And that's especially what operations and maintenance is able to do. This is for us a key thing to think about. How do we balance design intent versus actual measured performance? And one of the struggles we've had with LEED, frankly, over the last 20 years is that buildings tend to certify and then disappear. So not that many buildings that certify under new construction actually have come and recertified under existing buildings. Not that many are even tracking their performance. We don't really know how well they're doing. Similarly, in the existing buildings world, while recertification has been required, many buildings have not actually engaged to do that. And so we want to try to streamline that process and get every building engaged in not just a one-time event, but LEED is part of an ongoing process that leads to better buildings over time. Another piece that we thought about is expanding the marketplace. As we said, we want to have everybody can be in a green building. And so the development process that we've worked through involves first technical development work, followed by piloting, public comment, and eventually these changes get balloted. So the 4.1 O&M is now in the beta. It's been that since last spring. This morning, the version 4.1, other versions, B, D, and C, I, D, and C, got released, and they're actually up on the LEED credit library if anybody wants to go look at the language. Pretty cool stuff. But all of this is there in part because of your questions, your comments, your responses. And as it goes on, it is a beta process. We listen to what's happening in the marketplace. We incorporate that, and eventually you, the USGBC membership, will vote to decide whether these things are going to be permanently in the rating system. So there's a more convoluted version of the same process, but the idea is that we set basic goals, we beta, and then ultimately with public comment, we then go through the voting process. And so what we've ended up with in LEED version 4.1 O&M is this very simplified scorecard. It's probably the least number of things on a scorecard that you've ever seen from LEED. And it's intentionally that way to make it more accessible to more projects and to more teams. But it's really also based on performance. And it uses the ARC platform. And ultimately, it's these 6 performance metrics that make up 90% of the score: transportation, water use, energy, and we look at energy in terms of energy use, but also the related carbon emissions, recycling, indoor air quality, and the occupant satisfaction. Those are the things that make up the 4.1 beta O&M. The ARC tool is a key part of this. This is the platform we use to track all of this information. And if you don't know about ARC, you probably haven't been to Greenbuild before, but we're going to talk more about that as we go on here today, I think, as well. And so I think my call to you is 2 things. First is to engage in the process. As we ask for feedback and public comments, give it to us. But also, if you've got a LEED project, whether it was B, D, and C or it's O&M, re-engage with ARC. We can now recertify any project that's ever been certified under ARC, and you have access to that right now for those projects. So engage, use these tools, and we're going to get a lot out of it. We're going to reach the goals we're aiming for together. Thanks.
And so every great adventure story involves some sort of treasure map, and this one is no different. In this case, the treasure map has a rainbow just at the heart of it. But before I get to the treasure map, I want to provide some context for how this map was developed. LEED O&M and any rating system is built on the foundation of our overall system goals, which are these 7 goals. These goals are the things that we want LEED projects to be good at. And over time, LEED has shifted from a do less harm to a do more good mindset. These goals are weighted with the reduced contribution to global climate change having the most significant weighting. These weightings then translate into where emphasis is placed in the rating system and how points are distributed, which I'll touch on in a few slides. So to contradict the rating system scorecard that Chris just showed, this is kind of where we started. LEED has gone through many variations, starting in version 2 to 2008, then 2009, which this is from, onto V4, and now we're at V4.1. Each version improved upon the previous, raising the bar for defining leadership in green building operations and maintenance. This image, the version 2009 scorecard, shows all of the prerequisites and credits that comprise the rating system. You can see here it's a long list of great strategies to improve the environmental performance of the building. So here's your rainbow. In 2013, we introduced the LEED dynamic plaque, which is now referred to as the performance score and lives on the ARC platform. The performance score uses data to calculate real-time score reflecting how the building is performing compared to similar buildings around the world in areas of water, energy, waste, transportation, and human experience, as Chris just showed us. So now coming back to the V4.1 scorecard, this is our map. In 2018, we are now combining the best of two programs, the prescriptive elements of V4 and the performance elements of the performance score. You can see how much the rating system has been streamlined. And just a couple more points diving a little bit further into what V4.1 entails. 90% of the points in V4.1 are performance dependent and use data as documentation. And so that's where all of the streamlining comes in. Accordingly, projects must enter data into the 5 performance areas that we've discussed. The rating system has been simplified. And now there are 7 remaining prerequisites that were there in V4 that have been carried over into V4.1. Aside from the points in the performance score, there are 10 additional optional credits available to earn points. These are comprised of strategies that do not have a direct relationship to the performance score, such as site management or green cleaning. So this is diving into the ARC platform a little bit deeper. You can see a performance score for each of the 5 different areas. So each of these performance scores are given a score on a scale of 0 to 100 and then translated into points. And each area, you must score at least a 40 out of 100 to meet the minimum requirement to earn 4.1 certification. These 0 to 100 scores for each category are then weighted to reflect the contribution each category makes to LEED goals. So this is what I was referring to in the beginning regarding the goals that we set out, climate change being the heaviest one. That is reflected in the energy score points, which there are 33 total points available in energy. Adding up all of the points available, 90 points are available through the performance score, and then those 10 coming in through other credits, totaling 100 points available within the rating system. And so now that we have the map, we can move forward in our quest, but is it as easy as that? What happens when we go to market to implement something big?
All right. Let's see. So that's a USGBC slide. That's not mine, so I'm not sure exactly what it's meant to represent, but we'll take it at face value. Oh, yeah, that might be it. So these late afternoon sessions, there's good and bad always when you start at 4:30, is you're far enough away from lunch, so the food coma kind of ended, but we're way too close to happy hour, and that's very distracting. I can tell by some people's faces. I appreciate the USGBC inviting me to be on this panel. We've had, I wouldn't say it's necessarily contentious, but through the development that Chris talked about of LEED Dynamic Plaque and an ART and version 4.1, we've had a lot of feedback for them. There's some things about it, it's not perfect, and that's why it's still in beta, and we'll still go through the public comment and voting period. But, we have started to embrace it with clients. Oops, wrong way. Sorry. There we go. And it, as Chris started to mention, that they're trying to capture some of the market we've missed all along. LEED was originally developed to really capture the best buildings or make the best or reward the best building, let's say, which was great. So you have your best and brightest buildings. Those are the ones we all certified and we recertified. A lot of times they didn't have to do a lot, and so we're making marginal changes to them. But the rest of the market, the low grade, well, it's low grade, but A buildings that are a little lesser, not in CBD districts, the B buildings, C buildings, they couldn't embrace LEED because they couldn't meet the prerequisites or it was too costly. So LEED version 4.1, part of its design is to capture those buildings and make it much more inclusive, which already some of the buildings we have in the beta project with our clients is proving that likely will be true. The other thing that Chris mentioned, and I thought about commenting on, is it would be great if those design construction buildings, new construction, core and shell, that have their lifetime point-in-time certifications would embrace 4.1, but that's still going to be a tough road to hoe because they don't have to. And until the USGBC decides to not make those lifetime, it'll never really evolve because you're just spending money to get something that you don't really need, and the market doesn't care. LEED is LEED, right? Whether it's existing building, core and shell, new construction, we know, but nobody else knows. Tenants don't know, brokers don't care. But so going back, thinking about really the mission that we have, and I say we, USGBC, myself, CBRE, as consultants, is to make the world a better place by transforming the marketplace. And that's what LEED was developed, and LEED version 4.1 is fully headed down that track. I had one other thing. So thinking about LEED version 4.1, because the scorecards, you saw the scorecards, but I'm going to talk about a couple things we like, some things we don't like about it particularly. So the good is, as Danielle had on one of her slides, the annual review. So annually you have to, basically you're recertifying annually. And while it might not be the most difficult thing to do, because you're focusing on measurements, but it is an annual check-in. And those of us who have certified buildings, and then you have your 5-year recertification period, many buildings, whether it's because of ownership change, property manager, engineering changes, they do nothing for 5 years. And then we show up again, and it's like, what have you done? And they say to us, what is LEED? It's like, okay, well, that's not so good. But they get recertified, and we start all over again. But this annual check-in really is a good component to this program. Unhinging the system from Energy Star is a good idea, and not just because of what's gone on last year with Energy Star and the change in the CBEX data, which lowered a lot of scores, but Energy Star, those of us who've worked with it a lot, it was, again, that data needed to be updated, right? It was so old, and there's buildings, too many buildings had 90-plus scores in Energy Star when we could walk in and find 10 things that they're doing wrong or find energy efficiencies for them. So that adjustment was very necessary, but it's actually a good thing that USGBC unhinged themselves from that. Removing credits, as you saw the credit list that Kat showed, there were so many credits in the existing building program that were really design-oriented, right? We could do nothing about them but report on them. And it wasn't going to change the performance of the building or change what tenants do in the building, so a lot of those were eliminated, and that's very, very positive. A couple negative things are that the scoring methodology in the start of LEED Dynamic Plaque, and it's part of ARC, and maybe will be more transparent when we go through the public comment and balloting period, but that's still kind of a mystery, because that part of this was not developed in a real consensus manner. It was developed I won't say secretive, but in a small group manner. So it will be good to know more about that. The ASHRAE Level 1 audit, we believe that could be eliminated from the system. They kept that in. Having an energy audit is key, right? But you don't need the full ASHRAE level audit. Focus on what really matters, which is discovering ECMs, determining how those measures will improve the property. So have a reduced I'll send you a note on that, Chris. A reduced scope, but don't make it an ASHRAE Level 1 because it's really not necessary. The other thing, another negative was retrocommissioning, which I know it's mentioned in the guide under the new EA prerequisite, but it's eliminated as a credit. And so of the hundreds of buildings we've taken through certification, many of those did a full retrocommissioning, partly because they got credit for it in the system, but every single one of them derived some great benefit from it, actually. And so I'm afraid we're going to miss that. That's something that people won't consider because they don't really get credit for it in LEED, and you don't really have to do it, which is very unfortunate because it is one of the biggest paybacks you ever get going through LEED existing building certification is doing that piece of it. I have many other likes and dislikes, but we'll move on. This fatigue and determination. So one thing, for the last few years, I hear different times from some people I know and like and trust, but I hear about this LEED fatigue, and it puzzles me. It's like, well, what do you mean? And I heard I was at the BOMA conference, and they talked about it. Well, I'm sure they did at BOMA, but what does that really mean? And when I think of fatigue, I think of mental or physical exertion that causes some sort of fatigue, and I get there's other types of it, but with LEED, it seems like it's more a sense of overexposure, meaning somebody's heard about it for 12 years now, so they think, why am I still hearing about this? Apathy, again, lack of interest, lack of information. So even though I don't believe in it, and I don't believe it's actually real, it's just something people talk about, we have to address it. Because if we ignore it, then we're not going to engage those people. So version 4.1 gives us a chance to address that false fatigue. And so because it's new, because it's different, because it has that performance measurement piece that Danielle was talking about and Kat was talking about, and it is something new and different to go talk to clients about and talk to owners, so that's very helpful. One of the kind of add on to that is that periodically we see studies or surveys that there's this green building saturation in the U.S. or in certain markets. And that always puzzles me as well because I think it's nonsense. Those are very flawed studies because, as Chris mentioned too, is we've barely scratched the surface. Of all the hundreds of buildings that Craig Sheehy has certified, I've certified, Danielle certified, there's thousands more we haven't had a chance to get to because the system wasn't quite right for it. And that's what we think version 4.1 will definitely help. So the last piece I had was moving forward, and again, it's the engagement with clients. It's starting to have these conversations in the marketplace, educating people on what it is, what the new version is going to be. Hopefully, there's a lot of interaction on the public comment period, and I'm sure there will be, and some true collaboration with the USGBC. I won't go backwards to version 4 because there was a lot of public comment, but the collaboration seemed more limited there because we ended up with a system that was potentially the death knell of LEED for existing building. It was too difficult, too expensive, too complex. So this is a much better system now. And one of the things, I don't know, maybe Kat or Chris, that maybe I should know. Do you know when the public comment period and then the balloting is expected to occur? Or is that being announced tomorrow?
Yeah,
Springtime?
The intent is that the beta period for all these different versions that are coming out of beta would last at least a year, and then we would look at what we've learned from the beta period, perhaps revise language, make 4.2, something like that, and then it may be that we would do another round of beta, or it may be that we would then go into public comment and eventually balloting. I think that the timeline is pretty aggressive. We'd like to get balloted versions in place within 12 months or so, but I'm not sure exactly. It depends on their market response, to be honest.
All right, I appreciate that because that's going to be important. The sense is, not the sense. This is where we're going, and so the sooner that starts, I think the better, and have that engagement, and then we go to ballot, we move on because this is where the rating system we'll all be working with in the future. So my last couple of things is the reason I showed these triathlon-oriented slides is, and as Kat mentioned at the very beginning, it's really a journey, and the journey of sustainability, the journey of certification, the journey that we're going on to improve the environment through improving the built environment is much like a triathlon where there's goal planning, there's training, there's pain and suffering, there's negativity, there's you have to be completely dedicated and focused, and so that's to reach where you want to go. So I see them being somewhat similar in that way. And again, when you're on this road and reaching your success, or maybe you're ready to quit, there always could be a dude in a unicorn hat holding an umbrella standing by the side of the road, which would be awesome if you saw that. All right, I'm done.
And we come upon our final chapter, Finding the Pot of Gold. And are all pots of gold containing gold and jewels, or is there more to be found? I am so impressed that you all are still here, like at this point of the day, and have stayed for the session. So thanks for doing that. My name is Amanda Timmons, and I have been working with LEED for existing buildings, then operations and maintenance, then LEED Dynamic Plaque, then ARC, now LEED version 4.1 since 2007. So my clients have been saying, okay, so we're trying to bring all buildings in. Is that really going to happen? Like, is this really something that all buildings can do? So what I wanted to just share is a few of our success stories. So the Colorado State Capitol first earned its LEED certification in 2008. Government building, they fell a little bit behind the 8 ball in getting recertified. So they had just gotten LEED certified with the version 2008 version of LEED EB at that time. So we got the ball rolling again. Everything was set up and ready to activate in this platform. They were able to renew at gold. So this is not a new state-of-the-art building. This is a historic building. So this is, I think, a great success story. And we're moving even higher and higher into the thresholds for gold. A lot of the other buildings that we work with are not the newest, sexiest buildings. I like to try to see how are we doing with some of these 80s, 90s buildings, and how are they actually performing? So here's Mountain View Corporate Center 1 that just barely made it into LEED Silver in 2011. We've been tracking strong into silver and shooting to hopefully get into gold for 2019's round of certification. Its sister property, Mountain View Corporate Center 4, is a single-tenant building where they can have more control over what they're doing. We were able to get that building into gold in 2017, initially just was LEED certified in 2011. 1001 17th Street, old phone company building from the 70s, is now, we got it to gold using LEED version 3 in 2012. We've been renewing strong into LEED gold using what I've been calling the ARC performance path or the ARC platform. Denver Corporate Center 3, another one from the 80s that just got LEED silver barely in 2011, sitting safely in gold using this new platform. And again, just suburban buildings being able to achieve gold, looking at true performance and not necessarily the initial design and construction. So what I think has always been missing from LEED is that, as you saw earlier, it's this big long checklist that we are completing with the property manager and the building engineer. But the people showing up to work at the building every day have really never understood what is LEED, what is the benefit for me. You know, it just isn't something that people have generally understood as far as just showing up to work at the building. But now with this performance path, I really want to talk to you about what I've found on the air testing side. So on the human experience track, we have to do CO2 and VOC testing, so carbon dioxide and volatile organic compounds. We have to show up and do that testing every single year, not just do, see what documentation we get from the cleaning company every 5 years. So when we show up to do that, I use handheld meters. This is one of the accepted pathways to do it. If you ask my friends in college, they used to call me Demanda. I've always been a little bit of a control freak, so I like to have the actual handheld meters and have control over where I'm setting it up so I don't have somebody walk by, with Axe body spray and contaminate my reading. So we walk around with these meters, and what we found is that people are asking, what are you doing? Because I kind of already look like Melissa McCarthy a little bit, and so then I'm walking around with this ghost-busting equipment. And people are like, what are you doing? Are we detecting for radon, or is this nuclear? Like, what's going on? And I'm able to talk to them about the fact that with this orange meter, we're looking at CO2, and high levels are going to make you drowsy and not productive. And here's your level, 420. Perfect. The bottom meter, parts per billion of VOCs. I've been at 0 all day in your building. That's exactly what we want to see, is clean, healthy air. And people love this. They're so excited that the building is looking at it. They had no idea that this was something that was being looked at. So these are our kind of typical scores that we find, or the typical readings that we find when we're measuring CO2. They're on the left-hand side, so numbers between 400s, 500s, 600s, 700s, and then VOC. So we have to put in the minimum detectable range when I'm measuring in parts per billion, which works out to 2.29 micrograms per cubic meter, which is what they want in the platform. So we put in that minimum 2.29. That's all we're finding at the properties. So that's kind of what's been our typical results. So in exchange for anonymity, our client allowed us to share this story with you today. So this did not start out as a pot of gold. This started out as a pot of coal. So this is a suburban office complex in Virginia, 3 buildings that share a parking structure, but are completely separate buildings with their own mechanical systems. Nothing shared between them. They earned LEED Silver in 2013 using operations and maintenance. They had higher Energy Star scores for these buildings from the 80s and 90s that were in the high 80s. And keep in mind as we talk about this, they completed an IDNC, or a tenant finish version of LEED for one of their tenants in late 2017. As part of that, they had to do outside air testing. Okay? So when I showed up with my ghost-busting equipment, this is what we found as we started the air testing. So we'd done the transportation survey that morning, fired up the air testing equipment at 10:42 that morning. This is in the building management office. I've got CO2 at 1,440 parts per million, and I've got VOCs at 138 parts per billion in the property manager's office. So I was like, Houston, we have a problem. So they had construction going on next door. I was like, well, maybe it's the construction. So we continued throughout various floors of the building. 1,570 parts per million of CO2, 29 parts per million of parts per billion of VOCs. And as you can see, as we would expect, as people are in the building, the levels just keep climbing throughout the day. The building next door, completely separate mechanical, exact same thing. So I was like, Houston, we really have a problem. What is going on here? So extremely high levels of both of these contaminants. So I was an economics major. I am not a science major. So I knew that this was bad, but I didn't really know what it meant. So here's a great article from Fortune magazine that kind of broke this down about carbon dioxide. The air you breathe at work may be slowing you down. So what they talk about here is that they're doing a study, or there was a study completed by Harvard, and they were looking at test scores and performance in terms of carbon dioxide. So what they found is that your sharpness can fall by 15% when CO2 levels reach moderate levels of 945 parts per million. You saw that our levels were way higher than that. So if we go down to the other paragraph, at 1,400 parts per million, test subjects' performance dropped by 50% on average. So in that building, we're not going to have good productivity for those people that are in there trying to get things done in the afternoon as they're falling asleep from high CO2. Here again from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services is a breakdown. So we were in that 2,000 to 5,000 parts per million area where we're going to start getting headaches, sleepiness, that stagnant air. On the VOC side, as you all might know, volatile organic compounds are in everything. So if I don't have proper ventilation, I've got these chemicals just sitting in the building being pushed around by the air handlers all day. And that's what we were finding at that building. And then in the last paragraph here, there's not as much knowledge as there is with the CO2 about exactly what those VOCs do, but you're definitely going to have complaints at 3,000 micrograms per cubic meter or higher. We weren't at that level at that building, which was good, but I still did not, of course, like those findings. So we rescheduled and did some looking at what was going on. What the chief engineer found that happened was in January, there was a freezing spell that came in. So one of the building engineers went in and said, all right, outside air system, we don't want you to open until it's 100 degrees outside. So it was a fix. It was Friday. You know, everybody goes home for the weekend. They've got construction projects. They're short-staffed, just like happens to so many buildings. So they came back on Monday and just forgot, you know, to reset the system. So that's what happened at 2 of the buildings. The third building was undergoing a building automation system upgrade, and the new components were not speaking to the old components that were still present on the outside air system. So this is the kind of stuff that can happen. You know, we can set up the air system to operate, to do our outside air testing, but when we hit go back to normal, those dampers were fully shut. So that happened in January, and I did that air testing in May. So those conditions had been present for 5 months at the building. So at least they found out what happened. We shared some of this data, and they were able to understand or do a training with the building engineers. This is why this stuff is important, because we're really affecting our tenant health and productivity, which can mean hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to their bottom line. So I really am hoping that as people understand this system, they're going to make that connection. So we went back the next week and did the testing after everything was reset to normal. And you can see hopefully see up there in the top corner that we got back to normal levels. So about 680 parts per million of CO2, and we aren't getting any VOCs. So immediately we're going to see better air in that building. So all across the board, we went from pretty high numbers to back within the healthy range. At the building next door, I'm still a little higher than I want to be on carbon dioxide, but that's when we can start making adjustments and looking at maybe the theoretical ASHRAE calculations for outside air are not completely on. Let's increase those minimums a little bit and get those levels down where we want them. So it's easy to make those changes. And again, what I'm hoping is that now, instead of not knowing anything about LEED, we can start talking to people about what this means, and that brokers will then hopefully be able to start driving attention to the buildings that are using this new performance path. So this, is version 4.1, just like you were talking about. I would probably counter to Gary. What we're finding a lot in Denver are lower energy scores. So if you see those outside tracks, our energy scores are a little bit lower. We have all coal-fired power plants. We have some renewables, but not as many as we should have. And it's based on carbon. So the first question I've been getting is, what can we do to improve our energy score? And my answer is, we should probably do a retro-commissioning study, because we're going to find some ways that we can improve performance and improve those scores. And there are some minor metrics available in the platform that will tell you you have to cut energy by X amount or water by X amount to get another point or 2 or 3 or however many more points you want to get. So that's a great place, I think, for buildings to start, in a way to hopefully keep that best practice into the program, just based off of the performance score. So that is my little story. So that brings us to the end of our story, a story which started with a grim setting, one of destruction leading to a call to arms, all in, all people, all buildings, come join our quest for measuring and improving what we do with our buildings, which is one of the biggest ways that we can have a positive impact on climate change. With the right map, data, a bit of determination, and commitment to continuous improvement, we will all be led to a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And we will all hang out here. I think we have about 6-7 minutes for questions, if there are any burning questions from you in the audience. And we have a microphone at the center of the room.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the air quality questions. Z. Smith, SQ, Dumas, Ripple. Of course, 1,000 parts per million is what you get when you follow the ASHRAE standards. That's the problem with the ASHRAE standard for ventilation. But what I did want to ask is, with working with clients in the past, bringing in outside testing agencies has been quite expensive, and it's a big hump to get over. Now that there seem to be, not the consumer grade, but the kind of building grade, continuous monitors for VOCs, CO2, and so on available in kind of the $1,000 range with traceable back to calibrated standards, is there an opportunity to use the output of those systems rather than paying a testing agency to come by only once a year? It would seem preferable to have something that's on all the time so you'd catch it not 6 months later.
Yeah, there's definitely sensors that are available that you can tie into the platform. I believe there's ways to tie smart sensors directly into the platform to feed that data in there for you. We like to do it our way because then I know that they're calibrated, because I get them calibrated right before we show up. But yes, there's absolutely ways to automate the
But those
process.
will be accepted? Those calibrated sensors that you can just get, those are accepted in the standard grade?
Yes.
Hello. So you emphasized all buildings, but I noticed most of your case studies are commercial office buildings. Could you talk about the challenges of using LEED version 4.1 for non-commercial office buildings? I sort of know the answer to this, but I want you to kind of speak to the room, as well as how the USGBC will address this issue, because we do want to see it expand beyond just commercial office buildings.
Go for it, Danielle.
Yeah. Yeah, we work with all kinds of building types, and we see the same thing. Like a lot of our buildings that are going for LEED are the high-rise Class A office buildings that are already kind of more high-performing. There are a lot of challenges, and I think the whole time that I've been working with the USGBC, that's been my biggest battle, eliminating those barriers, reducing the costs, streamlining the process, and so we can get other building types. I would say multifamily, for example, just having whole building data is a big challenge, which already is a barrier. Industrial properties, I think, is the same thing. Some of those building types, like some of the prereqs, for example, will cross out, like the prereq for the indoor quality assessment will also knock out hotel buildings because the cost is cost prohibitive to do some of the indoor quality, the assessments that have to be done. So I think, and just tying into what Chris and Gary said, because even internally, with the committees and things, a lot of people are like, we're not doing enough, we have to do more, it has to be more stringent. But it's like, what's the point? You can get all this, net zero buildings, but the impact is so small, we really need to be able to, to transform the market, we really need to reach, a broader market. And for a lot of our clients, the cost is also still a barrier. Even with lowering, it's still not. And so there's a lot of clients also opting for other rating systems that are kind of cheaper, more streamlined. But I think we continue on that path of automation and streamlining, lowering the cost, simplifying so that we can reach some of these other building types that right now have a challenge.
Two other things that happen in 4.1 that I think help us with that. The first is you mentioned the different building types. So when we were relying wholly on Energy Star, we were stuck with the types of buildings that were in the Energy Star database, and that turns out to exclude lots of building types and also lots of places around the world. So with the ARC platform, we're able to create an energy score for many other types of buildings. And the other thing that we should have mentioned earlier that I think is a really important part of 4.1 beta is that you now can do operations and maintenance on a single individual tenant space. And so even if you are renting a floor of a much bigger building, you can use these tools to look at your space specifically. And I think that's going to be very powerful when people realize they can do that.
Before we move on to the next question, I want to add cat wagon shoots. My team, I'm a part of a team called Technical Solutions, and part of our charge is to work with those building types that don't fit into the normal box to figure out what pathways can we work with to move forward. And we've done a lot of things with manufacturing facilities, for example. So reach out to me, reach out to my team, and we'll work with you.
Hi, I'm working on a LEED version 2009 commercial interiors project, and I just wanted to know if I could use ARC to better track our data.
Yeah. So you used different data for that? If you're the important thing to think about is when you're using ARC or any version of EBOM, you're looking at actual performance over time, whereas when you're looking at a design and construction process, you're really looking at predicted. So as an example, if you were pursuing CI 2009, you would track your recycling rate from the construction process, whereas in 4.1 O&M, you're looking at the recycling by the occupants of the space. So I think the way that we envision it happening is as you design and build out that space, you would still use LEED for interior design and construction, but then you can immediately, once you're certified, use ARC and track your ongoing performance just as a tracking tool, and then at some period in the future, if you want to recertify, and we hope you would, you could do that for that space.
Okay, so the way it's designed is after you've certified, you can import that data and then just use it as a tool to maintain.
It's surprising how many people don't know, but any certified building already, you can go just turn on ARC for it and use that.
I think any registered building.
Any registered building. In fact, any registered building. That's right.
So you could start entering data now.
But yeah, your scoring is based on use, like energy use per person in the space and water use per person in the space. So it is once it's occupied is when you'd use it.
If you don't have the lights installed yet, you're not going to be able to calculate how much they're using.
Okay, because it's a space that was occupied, and now so I was just trying to understand if I could use it now since it was already occupied? And now we've moved those people out, and now we're in the construction phase. But I'm just trying to find a better tool to organize all our data. We're having some issues. So I was just wondering if ARC would be
I think it depends on how much of intervention in the space you have. If all you're doing is really moving a new set of people in there, you could look at the past data if you had access to that and potentially do that. But I think you want to reflect the changes you've made, and that will take some time after you've made those changes to be able to generate a score.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. I'm working on a couple of existing buildings, 4.1 projects, but in the preliminary assessment, and we're struggling trying to find how to assess the building owner on the energy aspect before registering. So there's no equations. So I got the bills, but they don't say, hey, we don't have to register right now. Please give me a pre-assessment, and then we will register. So we're struggling on the energy part of how to predict if the project is achievable or not.
Right.
I think
in
you're
terms
right.
of energy.
If you want to.
Yeah, we have a lot of folks that reach out with that same question. Feel free to send me an email and we'll talk.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for the compelling story. But every story ends with a cliffhanger. Here's the cliffhanger. Book 2, tomorrow, 8 a.m. Book 3, tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. And I know in Book 3, in this room at 9:30, some of the secrets that Gary was wondering about will be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
So at 9:30.
9:30, we're going to see inside the black box.
9:30, right here.
Sounds good.
At 9:30, the presentation is the ultimate guide to understanding the scoring in ARC. Right here.
Okay, so maybe my questions will be answered tomorrow. I'm still going to ask you. So I'll say I'm very, very excited about 4.1, particularly for the Class B and C opportunity that it presents. We are working with a number of buildings where, so I'm from Toronto in Canada, and where they're struggling to meet the benchmarks. And it is a mix of, what your energy grid looks like. So across our country, it varies. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts or suggestions in terms of challenges about where buildings struggle to move the needle. They'll score 4 out of the minimum 6 needed for the water performance. And when we try and move that analytics tool, it's just 40% kind of water reductions required. And so, just your thoughts in terms of where the building is as efficient as they can be, but they are constrained by what the regional energy or water the source energy is.
I would just want to start with that really quick. So that's one thing that we're going to be doing as well, going through the beta process. Buildings in Denver tend to use a lot more water, so we're really going to struggle to get to that minimum threshold, and I think that was part of what you were asking. So it will, like you said, give you metrics on how much more you need to cut. But I think that is probably part of what we're going to be commenting back about is, are there going to be maybe some regional exceptions, but maybe, on the flip side of that coin, maybe there shouldn't be. I mean, maybe we do need to start looking at, no, if you have a bunch of turf and sprinklers and a dry climate, you don't qualify.
Yes.
So that's just my 2 cents.
But I would agree. Like, I'm also in two minds about it, that it raises awareness, but at the same time, I don't want buildings to get discouraged. There's this great tool that eliminates a lot of the documentation and effort associated with it, and it's truly performance-based, which is the real strength of this, that it gives you feedback immediately on how you're doing. But then I don't want them to get scared.
And I think, and obviously the goal is to get the certification, but I think through ARC you can at least use as a tool to track and see what's happening.
Right.
And if it's you're not getting a good score, maybe try to implement some measures and see how that's impacting. So I think it's it could be a good tool to use even if they're like, okay, I don't qualify yet, but maybe we can make those this retro commissioning, this retrofits, we can get rid of my turf and see how that's moving the needle. But then at least, the property team now has a tool that they can use to track and see how different actions they're doing at the building are impacting their, energy and water efficiency.
I think the thing we've seen in past versions of O&M is that property owners will look at their portfolio and find the one or two buildings that are already performing well and go get a plaque for those.
Right.
And with this tool, we can put the entire portfolio in ARC and start to work on all of them.
Now, one thing that I've been pushing hard is I really think we should separate energy from carbon, because I think that's a big issue right now. That buildings, if you're in a place that has a lot of coal, a lot of renewables, you're getting penalized, and I think it should really be a true measure of efficiency. So I always cross out the transportation. I say carbon. It should be carbon to align better with our global Paris agreements and break off. And so it's a true measure of efficiency and a true measure of carbon, because oftentimes there's nothing you can do about the carbon part. So we have cases where we have a very efficient building that's not scoring well because it's getting a lot of power from coal, and we have a very inefficient building that's getting energy from renewable and scoring well, and then they're not doing efficiency improvements. So I think that it's something that we've been pushing really hard and saying, we need to separate them, but maybe there'll be another 4.2 or a version where we can keep working.
So, to be clear, 4.1, as it was approved, has a combined metric of energy and carbon. The implementation of that in ARC is ongoing. So we're getting there, but right now the Colorado project gets penalized more than the project that's the same efficiency in Seattle because of the electricity mess.
I'm sorry, sir, we're out of time for questions.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, one more. Okay, Greg, sorry.
So I got an early morning flight tomorrow, so maybe you can send me the cliff notes.
Yeah.
And that's my question is, I've got a 44-story building in Philadelphia with an Energy Star score of 63 that any day now is going to be getting platinum in the ARC performance path. And then I have a building in Portland that's one of the greenest buildings I've ever worked with. It's got a green roof. It's got tons of solar. It's got a great transportation program. It was LEED NC Platinum. They decided to go for platinum. They'd re-up again. I couldn't. We went through the process. I couldn't get them to platinum. And so that's where this thing of how the heck does this scoring even work? And maybe we'll find out tomorrow from well, you can send me the notes. And it's the hard part about, and hopefully it will help, like someone had a score of 43 today and needs to get recertified. Before I could do a gap analysis and tell them what it's going to take, now I don't know what to tell them. It's well, we got to do it. You just got to sign up for it, and we got to go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of feedback about, and I think USGBC understands that struggle that, people, someone's not going to sign up to go for it, a lot of them, if they don't understand if they're going to be able to get the certification. They're not going to pay the fee. So it's really important to, maybe there's a trial period where they can put into the system and see what's happening, but sometimes you don't have the data, which can be challenging. And the other issues, I think also breaking up energy from carbon would help address some of those issues where we have a very efficient building or a very inefficient building that's getting muddled with the whole carbon issue and kind of impacting their ability to get certified.
We're switching them to EVs so we can get them platinum.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what we're pushing for, is we're trying to get people to put their whole portfolio in, to be I can't predict necessarily right now where you're going to be, but if we get them all in now, and we can start at least looking at energy, water, and waste, I have a pretty good feeling of where we can get with transportation and human experience. So let's get them in there. You guys get the data that you want, and we start being able to say, these ones are going to get certified, these are silver. So that's what I'm hoping people do, is get the buildings in the platform, at least for energy, water, and waste.
And part of what Craig's saying, and I agree, and we've had this virtually the same problem of a building in Philadelphia, that we can't get the water efficiency right. And in prior versions, I could tell the client exactly what to do, and we'd get there. Now I have no idea, and we're essentially going to go in and do a full building water audit. It seems like it's a cooling tower issue, not the fixture issue. If they replace all their fixtures and we change the data, they still aren't at the minimum, so it's puzzling. And so you're right, but that's what our clients are asking us. Well, tell me how to get there, and I can't tell you. So
We need a scenario tool.
yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Right. Well, I know we're late
Beer 30,
on
right?
time.
Yeah,
So
thank you,
everyone
everyone.
enjoy the concert tonight.